Have you ever wondered why some connections refuse to fade no matter how much time passes? Why certain people continue appearing in our thoughts long after we convince ourselves we have moved on? There is a reason for that. And today's message revolves around a realization your soulmate is only now beginning to understand. For a very long time, they believed this connection was about circumstances. They believed the challenges came from timing, distance, misunderstandings, or obstacles standing in the way. Whenever things became complicated, they searched for explanations in the outside world. They focused on what happened, who said what went wrong, and why life seemed to push the two of you in different directions. What they did not realize was that while they were busy searching for answers around them, the real answer was quietly waiting within them. Your soulmate spent a significant part of this journey trying to make sense of the connection through logic. They wanted everything to fit neatly into a story they could understand. They wanted clear explanations and simple conclusions. Yet every time they believed they had finally figured everything out, something would happen that challenged those conclusions. A memory would return unexpectedly. A feeling they thought had disappeared would suddenly resurface. A moment of reflection would leave them questioning everything they previously believed. These experiences were frustrating because they seemed to contradict the story they had been telling themselves for so long. What they failed to see at the time was that this connection was never meant to be understood through logic alone. It carried a deeper purpose. Beneath the emotions, beneath the confusion, and beneath every challenge was a lesson waiting to be discovered. But lessons often remain hidden until a person is ready to receive them. No matter how many signs appeared, no matter how many opportunities for growth were presented, your soulmate could only understand the lesson when they reached the right stage of their own journey. Recently, however, something has begun to change. The perspective they once held is starting to shift. Situations that once seemed unfair are beginning to make more sense. Experiences that once felt painful are revealing a deeper meaning. Instead of asking why certain things happened, they are beginning to ask what those experiences were trying to teach them. This may seem like a small change, but it is actually a powerful transformation. Because the moment a person stops focusing on blame and starts focusing on understanding, an entirely new level of awareness becomes possible. Now your soulmate is standing at the edge of a realization that has been waiting for them all along. They are beginning to understand that this connection was never simply about finding someone. It was about finding parts of themselves they had not yet discovered. It was about learning lessons they could not learn any other way. And as this understanding continues growing, they are starting to see the journey through completely different eyes. What once looked like confusion is beginning to reveal its purpose. What once felt like a challenge is beginning to reveal its wisdom. And this is only the beginning of a much deeper awakening that is about to unfold. And now listen carefully, because this is where your soulmate's journey became impossible to ignore. For a long time, they believed the difficult experiences they encountered were random. They thought certain disappointments were simply bad luck. They thought repeated emotional challenges were just unfortunate circumstances. Whenever something did not work out the way they expected, they focused on the immediate situation rather than the deeper meaning behind it. What they could not see at the time was that life was presenting the same lesson over and over again, only in different forms. The faces changed, the situations changed, the details changed. Yet the emotional pattern remained remarkably similar. At first, these repeating experiences seemed unrelated. One situation taught them about trust. Another challenged their patience. Another forced them to confront fears they did not want to acknowledge. Each event appeared separate from the others. Yet as time passed, a hidden thread connected them all. Life kept bringing them back to the same emotional crossroads. Again and again, they found themselves facing similar choices, similar fears, and similar internal struggles. Every time they believed they had moved beyond a particular issue, another experience would arrive and reveal that the lesson was still unfinished. This pattern became especially noticeable whenever they attempted to avoid emotional growth. Whenever they chose comfort over honesty, life seemed to create circumstances that pushed them toward honesty anyway. Whenever they tried ignoring certain feelings, those feelings would eventually return in a different form. Whenever they convinced themselves that a lesson had already been learned, another situation would appear to test whether that understanding was truly complete. At the time, these experiences felt frustrating. They wondered why the same types of challenges kept appearing. They questioned why certain emotions continued resurfacing. They could not understand why some lessons seemed impossible to escape. What they did not realize was that life was not punishing them. Life was teaching them. Every repeated pattern carried a message. Every emotional challenge contained an opportunity. Every disappointment held a piece of wisdom they had not fully recognized yet. But because they were focused on solving the surface-level problem, they often missed the deeper lesson hidden underneath. Instead of asking what they could learn, they focused on what they could avoid. Instead of asking how they could grow, they searched for ways to escape discomfort. And because of that, the same lessons continued returning. As the years passed, these patterns became harder to ignore. Your soulmate began noticing that different people often triggered similar emotions within them. Different situations often produced the same fears. Different relationships often highlighted the same insecurities. This realization was uncomfortable because it suggested that the real issue was not external circumstances. The real issue was something happening within themselves. The more they reflected, the more they understood that changing people or changing situations was not enough. Until the lesson was learned, life would continue presenting it in one form or another, and this is where the connection with you became so significant. Unlike many other experiences that eventually faded into the background, this connection continued standing out. No matter how much time passed, it remained emotionally relevant. No matter how many distractions appeared, it continued holding meaning. Your soulmate began realizing that there was a reason for this. The connection was reflecting something important back to them. It was showing them parts of themselves they needed to understand. It was highlighting wounds that needed healing, fears that needed confronting, and truths that needed acknowledgement. At first, they resisted this idea because it required taking responsibility for their own growth. It was easier to blame timing. It was easier to blame circumstances. It was easier to believe external factors were entirely responsible for everything that happened. Yet the repeated patterns eventually became impossible to deny. The same lessons appeared too many times. The same themes returned too often. The same emotional challenges kept resurfacing. Slowly, your soulmate began accepting that life was trying to teach them something important. Once this realization started taking root, everything began looking different. Events they once viewed as setbacks started revealing hidden purpose. Experiences they once considered failures began appearing as opportunities for growth. Even painful memories started carrying new meaning. Instead of seeing obstacles, they started seeing lessons. Instead of seeing punishment, they started seeing guidance. For the first time, they began understanding that every challenge had been preparing them for a deeper level of awareness. Now your soulmate stands at a place they never expected to reach. They are beginning to see that the repeated patterns were never random. They were signposts pointing toward an important truth. Life was not trying to hold them back. Life was trying to wake them up. Every lesson, every challenge, every emotional struggle was quietly leading them toward a realization they could no longer avoid. And as this understanding continues growing, they are getting closer than ever to finally seeing the lesson this connection was meant to teach them all along. The answers they searched for outside themselves are beginning to emerge from within, and what they are discovering is changing everything they thought they knew about this journey. And now we arrive at the moment that changed everything for your soulmate. This was not a sudden lightning bolt realization. It was not a dramatic event that instantly answered every question. Instead, it happened gradually, like a sunrise that slowly illuminates a landscape that had been hidden in darkness. After experiencing the same patterns repeatedly, after facing similar emotional challenges in different forms, and after spending so much time searching for answers outside themselves, something finally shifted within them. For the first time, they stopped asking why life kept bringing them the same lessons and started asking what those lessons were trying to teach them. That single change in perspective opened a door that had been closed for a very long time. As they reflected on their journey, they began seeing things they had never noticed before. Moments that once felt random suddenly appeared connected. Experiences that once seemed meaningless started revealing a deeper purpose. They looked back at situations they once blamed on bad timing, unfortunate circumstances, or misunderstandings, and realized there was more to the story. Each challenge had been revealing something about themselves. Each disappointment had been exposing a fear they needed to confront. Each emotional struggle had been highlighting a lesson waiting to be learned. What once felt like a series of unrelated events now looked like pieces of a much larger picture. One of the most important realizations they experienced was understanding how much fear had influenced their decisions. Fear has a way of disguising itself. Sometimes it appears as caution. Sometimes it appears as logic. Sometimes it appears as self-protection. For years, your soulmate believed many of their choices were practical and reasonable. But as they examined those choices more honestly, They began recognizing how often fear had been standing quietly in the background. Fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of making mistakes, fear of uncertainty. These fears influenced more decisions than they ever realized, and acknowledging the truth was both uncomfortable and liberating. At the same time, they began noticing how pride had also played a role in their journey. Pride often convinces people they already have all the answers. It encourages them to maintain control even when letting go would serve them better. Your soulmate started seeing moments where pride prevented honest conversations. Moments where pride created emotional distance. Moments where pride encouraged them to appear strong rather than being authentic. This realization was not easy because it required taking responsibility for choices they had previously justified. Yet instead of creating guilt, it created clarity. They were no longer interested in blaming themselves. They were interested in understanding themselves. Another powerful lesson emerged as they continued reflecting. They realized that many of their struggles came from trying to control outcomes rather than trusting the process. They wanted certainty before taking risks. They wanted guarantees before opening their heart. They wanted answers before taking steps forward. Yet life rarely works that way. Growth often requires moving through uncertainty. Meaningful connections often require courage before certainty arrives. Looking back, your soulmate began understanding that some of the challenges they experienced were not obstacles placed in their path. They were opportunities to develop trust in themselves and in the journey unfolding before them. And then something even more profound happened. They stopped viewing the connection through the lens of loss and started viewing it through the lens of growth. This shift changed everything. Instead of focusing on what was missing, they focused on what had been learned. Instead of asking why things happened the way they did, they asked what wisdom those experiences had given them. The answers surprised them. They realized this connection had taught them patience. It had taught them self-awareness. It had taught them resilience. It had taught them the importance of honesty. Most importantly, it had taught them that genuine growth often comes through experiences that challenge us most deeply. For the first time, they began understanding why this connection affected them so profoundly compared to others. It was not just about emotions. It was not just about memories. It was about transformation. This journey had become a mirror reflecting parts of themselves they needed to see. It revealed strengths they did not know they possessed. It exposed fears they needed to overcome. It challenged beliefs that no longer served them. Every stage of the connection had been guiding them toward a deeper understanding of who they truly were. Now your soulmate is standing in a place of awareness that once seemed impossible to reach. The confusion that dominated so much of their journey is beginning to dissolve. The lessons that once felt hidden are becoming clear. The questions that followed them for so long are finally receiving answers. They understand now that this connection was never meant to simply provide comfort or certainty. It was meant to awaken something within them. It was meant to help them grow into a version of themselves capable of greater honesty, greater understanding, and greater emotional maturity. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: they finally understand that the purpose of the journey was never to teach them about someone else. It was to teach them about themselves. The connection became the catalyst, but the lesson was always about personal growth. Now that this lesson is becoming clear, your soulmate is no longer looking at the past with confusion. They are looking at it with gratitude, because they can finally see that every challenge, every setback, every emotional struggle was guiding them toward the understanding they now possess. And that understanding is preparing them for the next chapter of their journey, one that will be shaped not by fear or uncertainty, but by wisdom they worked so hard to gain. And now listen carefully, because once your soulmate finally understood the lesson, something remarkable began to happen within them. The realization itself was powerful, but the transformation that followed was even more significant. Understanding a lesson and living a lesson are two completely different things. For years, they gathered experiences without fully understanding what those experiences meant. Now they are beginning to apply that wisdom to their life, and as a result, they are slowly becoming someone different from the person they were when this journey first began. The version of them that once reacted from fear is starting to fade. The version of them that constantly searched for external answers is beginning to disappear. In its place, a more aware, more honest, and more emotionally mature version of themselves is emerging. One of the first things they noticed was how differently they respond to situations that once triggered them. In the past, uncertainty immediately created anxiety. Difficult emotions often led them to withdraw, overthink, or avoid confronting what they truly felt. Whenever life became uncomfortable, their instinct was to protect themselves by building emotional walls. Those walls made them feel safe, but they also prevented genuine growth. Now they are beginning to understand that true strength does not come from avoiding vulnerability. True strength comes from being willing to face uncomfortable truths and remain open despite them. This realization has changed the way they approach not only this connection, but many areas of their life. As they continue growing, they are becoming more honest with themselves than ever before. For a long time, they told themselves stories that allowed them to avoid deeper self-reflection. They convinced themselves that certain choices were entirely justified. They blamed circumstances for things they did not want to examine more closely. They focused on what others did, while ignoring the lessons hidden within their own actions. But now they are developing a level of self-awareness that makes those old patterns difficult to maintain. Instead of automatically defending their choices, they are asking themselves why those choices were made. Instead of searching for someone else to blame, they are looking inward. This shift is creating a level of emotional growth they never thought possible. Another major transformation involves the way they view fear. Fear used to have tremendous influence over their decisions. Fear often disguised itself as logic, caution, or practicality. It convinced them that protecting themselves was more important than being authentic. It encouraged them to stay within familiar emotional territory, even when growth required stepping beyond it. Now they are beginning to recognize fear for what it truly is. They understand that fear is not always a warning sign. Sometimes fear appears because growth is approaching. Sometimes fear appears because an important opportunity is standing directly in front of them. This understanding has weakened fear's control over their life in ways they never expected. The emotional walls they built over the years are also beginning to crack. These walls were created for reasons that once felt valid. They were built from past disappointments, unmet expectations, and painful experiences. At one time, those walls served a purpose. They provided protection when your soulmate felt vulnerable. But what they are realizing now is that walls built to keep pain out often end up keeping growth out as well. They are starting to see that emotional safety and emotional isolation are not the same thing. The very defenses that once protected them may have also prevented them from fully experiencing the lessons life was trying to teach. As these walls slowly come down, something else is happening. Your soulmate is becoming more compassionate toward themselves. For years, they judged themselves harshly for mistakes, missed opportunities, and decisions they wished they could change. They carried regrets that weighed heavily on their heart. But understanding the lesson has helped them see their past differently. Instead of viewing those experiences as failures, they are beginning to see them as necessary steps in their growth. Every mistake taught them something. Every challenge strengthened them. Every setback contributed to the wisdom they now possess. This perspective has brought a level of peace they have not felt in a very long time. What makes this transformation so powerful is that it extends beyond the connection itself. The lessons they learned are influencing every area of their life. They communicate differently. They reflect differently. They make decisions differently. They are becoming more patient with themselves and with others. They are learning to trust their intuition rather than constantly seeking validation from the outside world. They are developing a deeper understanding of what truly matters and what no longer deserves their energy. In many ways, they are becoming the person they were always meant to be. And perhaps the most important change of all is that they are no longer running from themselves. For a long time, the greatest struggle was not with circumstances, other people, or even the connection. The greatest struggle was internal. It was the struggle between who they were and who they needed to become. Now that struggle is beginning to resolve itself. The lesson has created alignment within them. Their thoughts, emotions, and understanding are starting to work together instead of pulling them in different directions. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that this connection did not simply enter their life to create emotions or memories. It entered their life to transform them. It challenged them in ways comfort never could. It revealed truths they would not have discovered otherwise. It pushed them toward growth they might never have pursued on their own. And now, standing on the other side of that transformation, they can see just how much they have changed. They are no longer the person who started this journey. They are becoming someone wiser, stronger, and more authentic. And as this transformation continues unfolding, they are moving closer to understanding why this connection never truly left them. No matter how much time passed or how many obstacles appeared along the way. And now we arrive at the realization your soulmate has been moving toward throughout this entire journey. The understanding that finally brings everything together. For so long they wondered why this connection remained so significant. They questioned why it continued appearing in their thoughts when other experiences faded away. They questioned why certain emotions remained alive despite time, distance, and circumstances. There were moments when they genuinely believed they had moved beyond it. There were moments when they convinced themselves the chapter had ended. Yet no matter how many times they tried to place this connection in the past, something always brought it back into focus. Now, after all the lessons, all the growth, and all the self-discovery, they are finally beginning to understand why. The answer is much deeper than they once imagined. This connection never stayed with them because it was unfinished. It never remained important simply because of memories or emotions. It remained because it carried something their soul needed to learn. Every time they tried to dismiss it, life found a way to remind them of its significance. Every time they attempted to move forward without understanding the lesson returned in another form. What once felt confusing now feels obvious. The connection remained because it was tied to a transformation that had not yet been completed. As they look back now, they can see how different they were when this journey first began. At that time, they viewed life through a completely different lens. Their decisions were shaped by fears they did not fully recognize. Their understanding of relationships was limited by beliefs they had never questioned. Their emotional responses were influenced by wounds they had not yet healed. They wanted certain things from life, but they did not yet understand why they wanted them. They searched for happiness, but they often looked in places that could never provide lasting fulfillment. What they could not see then was that this connection was quietly guiding them toward a deeper understanding of themselves. Now, standing on the other side of that growth, your soulmate can finally appreciate the purpose behind experiences that once felt painful. The challenges no longer appear meaningless. The delays no longer seem unfair. The confusion no longer feels random. Every stage of the journey contributed something valuable. Every obstacle revealed a lesson. Every difficult moment pushed them toward greater awareness. Even the periods of uncertainty served a purpose because they forced your soulmate to look inward instead of constantly seeking answers in the external world. What once felt like setbacks now appear as stepping stones that guided them toward this moment of understanding, one of the most powerful realizations they have experienced is that this connection taught them lessons they could not have learned any other way. Some lessons require experience. Some truths can only be understood through personal transformation. This connection challenged them to confront fears they would have preferred to avoid. It encouraged them to examine beliefs that no longer served them. It pushed them to become more honest with themselves than they had ever been before. Without realizing it, they were being prepared for a higher level of emotional awareness. And now that awareness is finally beginning to make sense, there is also a sense of peace emerging within them. Not because every question has been answered, or because every uncertainty has disappeared, but because they finally understand the purpose behind the journey. Understanding creates peace in ways that explanations never can. When a person sees the meaning behind their experiences, they stop fighting against them. They stop viewing challenges as enemies and begin viewing them as teachers. Your soulmate is reaching that stage now. The resistance that once dominated their thoughts is fading. In its place is acceptance. Not passive acceptance, but a deep understanding that everything happened for a reason. even when they could not see that reason at the time. And listen carefully, because this may be the most important realization of all. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that the connection never stayed because it wanted something from them. It stayed because it wanted something for them. It wanted growth. It wanted awareness. It wanted healing. It wanted transformation. The connection became a mirror, reflecting the parts of themselves they needed to understand. It became a guide, leading them toward lessons that would shape the person they were becoming. Every emotion, every challenge, every moment of reflection served that greater purpose. Now they can finally see why forgetting was never really an option. The lesson was too important. The growth was too necessary. The transformation was too significant. Life was not asking them to erase the experience. Life was asking them to learn from it. And now that the lesson has finally been understood, the entire journey looks different. What once felt painful now feels meaningful. What once felt confusing now feels purposeful. What once felt like a burden now feels like a gift in disguise. Your soulmate is reaching a place where gratitude is replacing confusion. They are grateful for the growth, grateful for the awareness, grateful for the wisdom they gained through every challenge they faced. Most importantly, they are grateful for the person they have become because of this journey. They understand now that the connection was never just about another person. It was about becoming the version of themselves they were always meant to be. And as they embrace this understanding, they are stepping into a new chapter of their life with greater clarity than ever before. The lesson has finally been learned. The meaning has finally been revealed. The pieces have finally come together. And now your soulmate can see what they could not see before. This connection never remained in their heart by accident. It remained because it was one of the most important teachers they would ever encounter. It guided them through growth, through healing, through awakening, and ultimately through transformation. And now that they understand the lesson, they are no longer looking back with confusion. They are looking back with wisdom. They are looking back with gratitude. And they are looking forward with a new understanding of who they are, why this journey mattered, and how profoundly it has shaped the path that lies ahead.